I have been an advocate for a long time of small diesels. I've always wondered why Ford and General Motors, or Vauxhall in Europe, why they don't produce or sell their small diesels here in the US. And because they get great fuel economy, they seem to be reliable. They've had decades in Europe of consumer use to work the kinks out of the system. Why aren't they here? Well, back in the 70s, this is what my dad told me, is back in the 70s they had some small diesels come onto the US market and they were shit. They were absolutely fell apart and they were completely unreliable. Nobody wanted them. So they got a bad rep in the US. Good or bad, it's the way it is. And this is persistent to this day. What's going on now is you can get the big diesels in pickup trucks. Recently, Ford Motor Company had a really bad run with the 6-liter diesel in their Fords. That 6-liter diesel was never designed to run in a pickup truck. It was designed to run in medium-duty trucks. In order to get the emissions to work, Ford Motor Company just dialed the knobs until the emissions worked. And the problem is they had to crank the heat up in the engine so that if anything went wrong with the engine at all and the heat went up any, you blew your engine. That's what happened with that 6-liter diesel. It was designed for medium-duty trucks that have completely different emissions than the normal consumer pickup trucks. They put it in a consumer pickup truck and did a shit job of setting the engine up for consumer pickup trucks. That's what happened. Well, Ford has learned very little from this, it appears. And this kind of crap is what's really killed diesels in the US. I've talked to several people about diesels, like why didn't you get a diesel pickup truck? People who've had both. Why did you get a diesel? Why didn't you get a diesel? And it all boils down to torque in the engine. The real choice maker for whether or not people get a diesel truck is whether or not they tow things and need a lot of torque in their engine. But if they do, they'll buy a diesel engine pickup truck with a heavy-duty suspension, heavy-duty transmission, and all that to do the towing and the proper rear end for towing. And if they don't need that, really the best thing to do is not get a tow kit vehicle. Just buy the standard consumer truck as it's set up to be a car with a pickup bed on it. And get the gasoline model. When you do the math between the initial setup cost of a diesel in a pickup truck and the maintenance, which is ridiculous on these engines. There's no reason the maintenance on these engines should be as high as it is. I've talked to some people about how much they actually spend to keep those engines running, engines and transmissions. It's ridiculous. It should not cost that much. Thousands of dollars a year to keep those engines running. It just doesn't pay to use a diesel unless you just need the more torque in the engine to pull heavy objects. So tow trucks, that sort of thing, they should get the heavy diesel option. So that's why diesels aren't in smaller vehicles, is because people try to get diesels in larger vehicles and they get a bad taste in their mouth, so they're never going to buy a diesel engine again. So I don't know. Diesel's gotten a bad name. Used to be really bad. Smoke and the smell used to be terrible. To be honest with you, you're not the one back there smelling it when you have a diesel. You're smelling other people in front of you as diesels. So what's the point? That shouldn't even be a consideration. I don't know. There's no win. Everybody says electricity is going to be the way to go next, but to be honest with you, you need special metals to make a decent electric car with the batteries. You got to swap the batteries out every 30,000 miles or whatever the number is. You got to they have maintenance issues as well. You got to sit down and wait for them to charge. I mean, they got their issues. And I really don't think that once everything comes out in the wash, that they're any cleaner than a gasoline engine. I just haven't seen numbers to convince me one way or the other. You're still pushing umpteen hundred pounds of steel and plastic down the road, so it's going to cost somebody something somewhere until we have horse-drawn carriages again. I guess that's the greenest way we could go. One of the YouTubers I watch is a farmer in New Jersey. Yes, there's farmland in New Jersey, quite a bit of it. he recently purchased a used Ford F-250 gasoline 4x4, and uses it as his farm truck and run around town, that kind of thing. And he's got big stuff up at the farm. He's a real farmer, you know, the big tractors and all that. This guy recently went through a list of all his tractors. He's got 20 tractors. I tried keeping count when he was describing him, running around his farm, pointing at a tractor and tell you what it was and what he used it for and that sort of thing. I lost count. It was around 20, I think. They're all diesel, I think. Every single one of them was diesel. And his reason for not buying a diesel engine in that truck, or not seeking out a diesel engine in his pickup truck, was because of reliability. And something he left unmentioned in his video was it's not really the fact that it's diesel's fault. It's the fact that it's an industrial type engine being put in a consumer product, and the regulations are just not caught up to allowing that to happen without there being just all these hoops you've got to jump through. So it's all those extra hoops and emissions controls and things like that. Because remember, the tractors don't really have that many emissions controls. They have plain Jane designs, and they're designed to do one thing, and they do it really well. And almost all of them are diesel. Of course, they're also almost all massive engines. But when you start getting into consumer products, like consumer vehicles like pickup trucks, and have to hit the road, the emissions problems are overwhelming, and the designers of the engines have not fixed the concept, have not come out with the fixes that are applicable to, how do I want to word that? The people who are designing the diesel vehicles have just not fixed the problems when it comes to emissions. And the emissions people don't care that they could make this thing run very cleanly. The people who design them could make them run very cleanly if they didn't have to put specific pieces of equipment on the engine. Old technology that was outdated when it was ordered to be put on all the systems. It's like the old catalytic converter story. Sometime in the 70s, I think it was 77, manufacturers were required to put catalytic converters on all their exhausts. The problem is, by the time they ordered this, catalytic converters were outdated. There were other ways of fixing the emission problems of car exhaust. So rather than going out and saying, well, you have to have these numbers dropped on your fleet, they came out and said, well, you have to put catalytic converters in the car, on all your cars. And the catalytic converters were not only expensive, but to be honest with you, their numbers suck. And they don't work in all conditions. They don't work when it's cold outside properly. They don't work when it's very wet outside. They have all these issues and all these times that they just don't really, they don't work. But the U.S. in particular is famous, the U.S. government is famous for putting orders out that says, edicts that say, we have to put this piece of equipment on the car. Okay, well, we didn't tune the car to use that piece of equipment, so we'll just slap that piece of equipment on the car and not worry about it, because that's what the government says we can do, and then we'll sell the car. And that's where diesel's at right now in consumer vehicles. Is there are efficient diesels out there, there are very clean diesels out there. The problem is they're being forced to just slap pieces of equipment on a diesel, put this piece of equipment on the diesel, get these numbers, and shove it out the door. And that's where diesel's at right now. And until that's settled, I have a bad feeling that won't be settled until whatever the next fuel that comes down the pike is. We'll all be running on natural gas cars by the time they get diesel figured out for consumer vehicles.